Hello everyone and welcome back to the Nursery World Show. I'm here with Her Majesty's Inspector Wendy Ratcliff, who is a lead on the early years policy team at OFSTED, has done a huge amount of work with the new EIF and is now leading on a whole bunch of interesting stuff to do with their early years strategy, in particular. Former practitioner, am I right in saying? So she definitely knows the lay of the land. Really excited to talk about a few different things today. The first thing I think is really, the last time we sat down was literally here 2 years ago. Not much has changed since, I guess.
No.
We've just had a small pandemic. But this week we had the launch of the OFSTED's new 5-year strategy. Do you just want to tell me a little bit about it and where early years comes into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So with our strategy that was published this week, there is a particular focus on early years, and we think that's really important. It's going to shine the spotlight on the importance of early years, and, you know, because it's such an important sector. We know that a child's early education lasts a lifetime.
Where does it come from, this new focus on early years? Is it coming really from the very top of OFSTED? Is it to do with your, partnership with the DFE? Why is this kind of new decision to have a specific focus on the early years?
I think that desire to have that focus on the early years is kind of like that opportunity to recognise and really appreciate the importance of those first 5 years of a child's life, and if we get it right in those early years, then that leads to a child's future academic success. And also, I think, you mentioned, Matt, then about the last 2 years and, the pandemic. We've got children now at the age of 2 that having their second birthday. They've known nothing else apart from living in a pandemic. And who would have thought we've been in this situation? So, we're seeing through some of our research, our education recovery research, that actually those children are struggling with some of their socialisation skills. Those facial interactions, they've known nothing other than face mask wearing. And so it feels that now's a really good time to have that focus on early years, and education recovery's got to start in the early years.
Because I think I'm right that there's eight different pillars or 7 different pillars of focus in this new strategy. And I think for me, it's so amazing to see that early years is a real strong one of them.
It's top.
And I guess I just want to know really whether you can put a little bit more, I know it's early days, it's the 5-year strategy. Can you put a little bit more meat on the bones in terms of what that is actually going to mean for the sector and how OFSTED is going to change things over the next 5 years?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things there is that, what we've said is we want to play our part. We want to play our part in the education recovery of our youngest children. We also will look at this through the eyes of research and our inspection insights and our training of our inspector workforce as well. So thinking about, for example, research, when we were building the EIF and working towards the EIF, we published some research about educational effectiveness, for example. Some of that underpinning background into why we've gone with the judgments that we've gone with, and the early years was a feature there. So that is published stuff there. We also like to build on our research over time. So I don't know if you'll remember this, Matt, but I'm sure people watching this will remember that we've had research around teaching and play, a balancing act, several years ago now, but it was around the time when we introduced the definition of teaching, which is still relevant. It's in our handbook. And that research was really important in terms of, finding out, making sure that balance was right. We know there's the importance of teaching specific things, but actually whatever an adult does is teaching young children. So that research is there, and it's just about also being able to build on that. Our schools have had some research published on curriculum more recently, subject focus, and we want to make sure that we replicate that for early years
Makes
over
sense.
time.
And I guess it's really interesting because I think you have such a unique insight. Really, there's no other organisation in the country who is spending so much time in settings and getting those insights. So is a lot of this research going to be driven by your inspection data, or is there also going to be further academic or society level research going into these kind of insights you'll be producing?
So I think if we think about the research that our specialists in our curriculum unit have published in terms of subject research, then there will be some of that academic research there that we can do, but also the insights that we've got to from our inspection and what we know, it's important that we publish that. And that's what we've been doing recently with the education recovery briefings.
I think there was another piece of the puzzle that I really personally loved in the report that came out this week, which was just saying that there's a responsibility almost that you want to raise your voice in support of the sector. Do you have any more information at all about what you'd like to do there and how Ofsted want to play a kind of bigger part in blowing the trumpet for early years, I guess?
I think we've already started to do that. Our Chief Inspector, Amanda Spielman, at the Nursery World Business Summit, for example, was actually publicly thanking the sector for the work that they've done and actually recognising that those struggles that have been there over the last 2 years, and actually those struggles continue. There are challenges. There's challenges around recruitment and retention. There's challenges around the education recovery. And actually all of that plays a part, and we want to make sure that we can do what we can to help there.
Makes great. And it was great to see Amanda there in person, which, unfortunately not everyone attending that day could make it there in person, like the minister himself, sadly, but it was great to see Amanda being there and raising her voice for the sector. I'd love to talk a little bit more about education recovery in the last little while. In the past few months, you've released this kind of education recovery report from the inspection data that you're starting to get through. Would it be possible just to give kind of everyone a little insight into what some of the top level areas that you're seeing, particularly in early years, that might be either maybe a positive or also that you're maybe slightly concerned about?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, so the first briefing we published was in December, and then we published one at the end of March as well, so the second one. So we've said that during this academic year there would be 3 briefings, so there'll be another one published in the summer. I think what's really important here is that we have seen different things for different ages of children. So if we think about our under 2s, those are those children, as I said, who have actually not known anything other than, living in a pandemic, which who would have thought that would have been a thing. And for those children, we're seeing that providers are telling us that those children are taking more time to settle. They are struggling with their socialisation. They are wary of unfamiliar adults, and that's partly due to the fact that they've missed out on parent and toddler groups and things, and those adults other than immediate family that they've seen have all had a mask on, so it's a real challenge for them. So we're seeing some of the personal, social and emotional development issues there. And then I think one of the other things that providers are telling us is the communication and language. The delays in that, fewer words, they're arriving with fewer words. And we're also seeing some of the strategies, particularly in this term's briefing, around some of those strategies that providers are using to help those children to hear more words, really. And then I think if we think about the children over 2, that some of those children are children who return to their setting after the pandemic, again, returning a bit more anxious. Others, though, were pleased to be back. And again, prime areas. I think, and importantly, it's interesting as well, I think, that we know that obesity in the under 5s is increasing. So concerns about children's physical development as well, some of those things. But I think one of the things that we're hearing that settings have done, and we've reported in that briefing, is that some settings have returned to group snack time. So children sitting down together to make sure that they do that sharing, turn taking, but actually it's an opportunity for those important interactions, high quality interactions as well.
I'd be really interested to hear you speak to, because if this is a concern that's kind of spreading through a lot of the providers, I guess the concern always when this comes from Ofsted is that, am I going to be being judged on a global pandemic essentially versus what I can do? So how are you kind of filtering these ideas about some of the delays that we might be seeing into also how you're working with the inspectors to make sure that they're not judging providers on something that it's really challenging for them to kind of fix, let's say?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a couple of things there. So we've obviously published that research. That research is out there. Our inspectors are involved in focus groups about it as well. We're making sure that our inspectors are aware of those findings, and that because they're seeing it on inspection, they're the ones who are sort of like, they know that that's happening. But I think what's really important with our education inspection framework and the way we go about our inspections is we're charged with finding out what it's like to be a child in this particular place, be that a day nursery, a preschool with a childminder. And our inspectors will want to find out from leaders and managers why they decide what it is that they provide for their children. So what is their curriculum? Why do you do what you do? What is it that you want your children to learn? And what knowledge and skills do you want them to have before they leave you in terms of being ready for what comes next? And that's the starting conversation. So if providers are saying, we've noticed that the younger children arriving in our setting now are struggling a bit with their PSED, for example, and this is what we're doing about it, then you know, that fits with, what you're providing, and inspectors will look at that.
And I guess another thing sort of along the same topic is about this idea of catch-up. And I think it's fantastic that we're notifying some of these things, but I know I've spoken to lots of people that are also concerned, right? If we're so focused on catch-up, are we going to rush through the curriculum just to get them to an end point? How do you think that providers need to think about balancing that desire to catch up, but also taking things at the child's pace?
I think that's really important, and I think that's about being really clear, leaders being really clear about knowing their children, knowing the context of the setting that they're in, and knowing where they want their children to be by the time they leave, because we know that those foundations, what happens in early years, lasts a lifetime. And the communication and language got to be a particular focus, and we know we've had an increased focus in communication and language when we introduced the EIF back in September 2019. And again, with the EYFS reforms, DfE's EYFS reforms, we can now see, and we're pleased to see, that there's a focus on vocabulary across all of those educational programmes. We know that communication and language, those stories, those singing songs, knowing those words, build that's the foundation for children to be able to start reading when the time is right, when they start school.
And I think just to kind of almost finish up, I think it'd be great to touch again on the EIF and to talk a little bit about what it's been like since, people might have not been inspected a lot. I know you paused inspections for a long time over the pandemic. They might be starting to think, okay, maybe my time with OFSTED is coming. Can you just remind people about some of the big focuses that they might experience if they've not had an inspection yet, under the EIF?
I think there's some really important messages there, and because the Secretary of State did pause the inspection for a while. So we went back to inspection in May 2021, I think it was. And I think ultimately there's a couple of things, I think, for people to reassure people. The Education Inspection Framework Handbook is published. Mm-hmm. There's no secret guidance out there. What inspectors will do on inspection is in that handbook, so have a look at that. The other thing I would say is that whole move away from assessment, that whole industry that had developed around assessment. We recognise the importance of those high quality interactions, and any type of assessment shouldn't take adults away from those important interactions. And ultimately, settings should have the confidence to do what they do every day. Don't do anything different just because the inspector calls.
And I guess, again, it's always good to remind people that you don't want people to be making evidence for the sake of OFSTED. That's still the case.
No, we don't want people to be having to reach up and take that folder off the shelf that's got an OFSTED written down the side, just because they think that's what we want to see. We don't.
The same goes for assessments, observations, evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Do what you do because it's the right thing to do for your children, and it's the right thing to do for your staff in terms of workload well-being. And don't do anything different just because you think the OFSTED inspector might want to see it.
I think it's a great place to finish on, Wendy. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt.
And we'll chat again very soon.
Thank you.